Private's better? That doesn't sound right to people. Private seems selfish, secretive. By contrast, public or government-run sounds like sharing. We're all in this together.
Sharing is caring.
It's like that children's song. People think sharing means public, and people like sharing. It's one reason governments grow. But as government takes control of more of life, the private sector is less able to bring us all the wonderful things it has brought us so far. I have this cell phone because it was invented without government first having to give the developers permission. Government was barely even aware that people were working on these things. Permissionless innovation is a wonderful thing, says the author of this book. He's Adam Thierer of the Mercatus Institute. And this permissionless innovation that brought us Google, Facebook, the phone, is threatened now?
Yeah, it is, John. There's a lot of efforts to impose permission-based systems on these new technologies. We're seeing it a lot with Uber and the sharing economies, but we're seeing it also in other fields like drones, like driverless cars, where it could make a real difference.
Drones, they're inventing all kinds of things, but the government says you can't do it unless you get an FAA license.
That's right. The basic argument that they make is that, there's these hypothetical worst cases that could occur, and they end up basing public policy upon those hypothetical worst case scenarios. The problem with that is if you base all public policy on hypothetical worst case scenarios, then best case scenarios will never come about. We'll never get life-saving or life-enriching innovations.
And the drone could crash a plane, but they weigh much less than seagulls, which planes hit all the time.
It's certainly true that there will always be accidents. There are always risks in the world. But we have ways of solving that without preemptive, precautionary, permission-based controls for everything. We can have common law solutions. We can have lawsuits. We can have contracts and property laws. Things like this can solve problems after the fact without the heavy hand of government quashing all that wonderful innovation.
Banning it first.
Right, exactly.
So drone makers are now going overseas.
Yeah, a lot of them are. A lot of them are basing their testing in Canada and Australia. A lot of driverless car companies are going to the UK.
If these rules had been in effect before, we might not have Google and Facebook and smartphones?
Exactly. Think about it. Think about 20 years ago if Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, if Steve Jobs of Apple, or anybody from Google had to come to the government, say the Federal Communications Commission, and get their blessing or a license to operate. You have to wonder how many of them would even exist today.
And I try to think about how come all these things were invented in the United States rather than Europe.
Right.
You have more people, plenty of smart people.
America got it right with our public policy towards the internet and digital technology.
The first time.
The first time around. 20 years ago, Congress and the Clinton administration put in place a set of policies that were basically permissionless innovation based. They basically gave innovators and entrepreneurs a green light, said, go ahead, do this, we won't come down heavy on you. But that, of course, as you've noted, John, is already changing. And the problem is that we have forgotten the lessons of the past where America really went out and conquered the world, and our companies are household names and envy of everyone across the globe.
What's been invented in Europe?
I have a hard time even naming a major European-based information technology innovator. Whenever I ask a crowd this question, I get blank stares.
At the beginning of the computer revolution, France said, we're going to control this. And they created a computer company, Minitel.
Right.
They gave people computers. Here, throw out your yellow pages, use these.
Yeah.
They had them in 5 different colors. They were going to be the leader, according to the media I read.
Right. Basically, France took an industrial policy approach to the internet. They basically wanted to micromanage or plan it from above. But that's not the way innovation happens. It's a more bottom-up or spontaneous kind of thing. You have to create the right environment and let innovators innovate.
And now Europe, threatening Google, has this thing called right to be forgotten.
Yeah, it's crazy. This is basically censorship on a global scale for not just the internet, but for, in a sense, history and journalism. They're going to scrub history away with this so-called right to be forgotten.
The argument is there are some mistakes out there, and my reputation, my future could be smeared. Somebody Googles me and some bad thing is written that really isn't exactly true. Let me start with a clean slate. And the courts in Europe said, right, you deserve that.
Sure, everybody makes mistakes, but the reality is that if we have a global internet censorship regime based on the idea of cleaning up everybody's past mistakes, that's going to be a disaster. The whole global internet's going to look like China or Soviet Russia runs it.
There may be crooks you can't find out about.
That's right. I mean, basically, there's always going to be another way to find information, but Europe wants to impose their censorship regime on the rest of the world. You think about all the amazing medical innovations that are already out there, but we could have many, many more if we allow the ramifications of the internet and the digital revolution to come into the world of health and medicine. But Our FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, very heavy-handed, very precautionary, doesn't want to allow for that sort of things, and they're driving a lot of innovators offshore. We have 3D printers today that can actually manufacture on the spot all sorts of amazing things, including, as I saw this one day at Johns Hopkins University Hospital at a conference, prosthetic hands for children with limb deficiencies. Volunteers were making on the spot these prosthetic hands for kids, but technically what they're doing is illegal. The FDA says you need to have rules and licenses for these sort of things, even though it's all being done free, for very cheap, for parents who need these things for kids that usually cost thousands of dollars. Why would we stop that innovation?
They probably got away with it because they were volunteering their time and their effort. It was done for free if they'd tried to make a buck.
That's exactly right. Basically, everything changes when you charge even a penny for something. Whether it's drones or 3D printers or virtual reality, you do it in a voluntary sense or a sharing sense, it's all fine. But as soon as you want to charge a penny, you're going to be regulated.
Thank you, Adam Thierer.